In this video, we will be going through the Connect One user application and talking about some of the common functions and explaining overall the application. The screen that I'm on currently is the browser version. The address is connectmysites.com, and you'll come to this login screen. You should have a username, password, and customer number provided to you to enter into these fields. And please note the application is available also through an Android app and iOS app, and there's buttons at the bottom of this link that can take you right to the download page for either of those. So I will log in, and the first screen we come to is what's considered like the main menu. So there's different functions that can be clicked on. Some of them have additional options to them. I'm actually going to start with Monitor that I clicked on, and with Monitor you're able to view what's going on with the system, as well as controlling functions like if you need to arm or disarm your system. I'm going to start with Activity. And under Activity, we can get a real-time view of what's happening. So this screen will automatically update as new events come in. So if someone swipes their card at a door with access control, that event will automatically pop up on the screen. And you can scroll down through the list to see other things that have been done in the past. This is designed to view recent activity, the last 100 events. To go back further in time, there is a reporting function which can also be used. And as we go through here, you'll see some of these have a little camera icon. If I click on it, there is the possibility of setting up rules to capture snapshots from the cameras that you may have at your facility upon an event. So there was a rule that captured a snapshot from 2 cameras when the system was disarmed. But the rule can be set up to be on any event. Could be an access event at a particular door, could be an alarm event. Any of those are options. There's also other buttons here on this screen. The in out gives a dashboard view of the users and what areas they've last accessed. And this also auto updates. So this could be up on a monitor if you want to see who's in the building, or which building they're in. If you notice, there's a label office building and plant building, and also South Shop. So there's multiple locations where these users could be, and you can see them all in the same place. And that goes for the events here on this screen as well. As you see, this is an event from the South Shop, and here's an event from the plant building, for instance. So even if there are multiple locations, you can see all those events in the same place. There is an option to filter the results. So if you just wanted to view one location at a time, you could. So I can click on the plant building, for instance, and now I'm just looking at events from the plant building. And you can also save preferences by using these checkboxes. If there's a certain way that you typically want to view them, you could save your preferences for that. The exceptions dashboard, which also automatically updates as things change, will show you if there's any issues, any trouble conditions, any sensors, doors that are currently unlocked, alarms that may be current. You can see that in a dashboard view by clicking on exceptions. GeoView is a ability to set up your locations in Google Maps, and I'll just show you quickly here. So the initial icons here are of the main status. We have a trouble status here at this location. This status is normal, and then we have an alarm status over here at this location. And if you click on it, you can see more information. So here's our building here, and we have a temperature sensor at 101 degrees. So that's our alarm condition here. You can set up the cameras on the view, so you can pull up your camera shots right from the map. Lock and unlock doors. You can go to other locations. We can arm and disarm There's a rear office. If I wanted to arm it, I could easily do that. And so that's what GeoView is about. The other buttons here with lockdown, for instance, you can send a lockdown to one or multiple locations all in one step. Here it's on all, so I could just hit lockdown. It's going to do both my locations, or I could individually choose which ones I want. And when the lockdown occurs, it's going to lock any doors that are currently in the unlocked state. And depending on how your profiles are set up, it can also deactivate certain users so that if they try to access those locations, they would be denied temporarily. And basically that would prevent them from walking into a possibly bad situation. And you can also store a custom message about the lockdown, and that custom message can be sent out through notifications, through email, text messages, and push notifications to the mobile apps. Gives the users information about what's currently going on. These two buttons here for activating automation tasks and task rules. And so if I click on this list, it shows me all the different tasks that I could potentially activate. If I want to activate one, I click on it, and yes, I do want to do that. And basically now that task is active. And what a task is basically a one-click operation for multiple commands. So in this case, I set up a task rule to unlock a door and lock the doors again, but with a 2-hour delay. So basically, it sets up these 3 doors to be unlocked for 2 hours. And those are configured through the interaction section that I'll show you soon. To continue on with monitor, the other options that you see here, cameras will pull up your camera so you can see what's going on. The security page will give you access to arm and disarm the different areas within your facilities, and also shows if there's any bypassed or zones in alarm or trouble in the same screen. And again, multiple locations with the label. And so if I wanted to disarm the office area at the South Shop, I can click that. Let's say I want to arm the rear area at the plant building. I can click on that, and then there's a few different options for arming. Force arm is if there's any zones in your system that are not in a normal state and say that there's a problem with it, you can force arm the system, so basically we'll arm everything else. And then if that zone restores, it'll become back into the system and protect it again, versus a bypass arm would bypass that zone, and even if it restores, it would not come back into the system. I'm just going to do the force arm option, and after you select all the different buttons of what you want to do, then at the bottom you'll hit send commands. And that's it. Now the commands are sent to the panel on site, and they will process, and you'll be returned back with the current status, which we see now. Our rear system is armed and the office is disarmed. All of the other screens operate the same way. So if I go to the automation screen, we can see our access doors. So again, if we want to lock or unlock doors, we can do so. Say I want to lock that door and I'll unlock this door. Again, the same situation. You click the buttons and then hit send commands. Most operations have a way of confirming that that's the action you want to have happen, so that you don't accidentally click on something and it has a negative effect on your system. There's usually an option to back out in case you accidentally clicked it. Like for instance, the lockdown. It doesn't just lock down by clicking on that button. It first presents you the options where you would then confirm by clicking lockdown again at the bottom. That's the overview of the monitor section. So we're able to see what's going on in real time, as well as statuses and controlling the system functions. I mentioned that the activity screen was showing recent activity. Reporting is a way of going back further in the activity log and setting up different filters of how you want to see that information. There are predefined reports over here on the left, and then there's also a method of saving custom reports over here on the right. So the custom reports you see in this list were previously saved. So on a brand new system setup, the list would be empty because you would create those as you need. I'll give you an example of one. This is a report that was created, which basically has highlighted unauthorized access denied events, and it has all the locations highlighted and from any particular user. And so that's all pre-saved, and I can just quickly hit run report, and I guess there weren't any denials, but if there were, they would come up in this list so that we can actually see some activity. I'm just going to select all in the event types and run the report again. And now you can see information that is in the report. It's showing the different site here, plant building, south shop, office building. So you can see information from multiple locations in the same set of results. And not only are we seeing information and statuses back from the systems, like for instance here the area was armed, there was area 2, which is called rear, but also you will see the audit trail based on the event types you choose. But here's an indication of the audit trail where we sent a command to disarm the office area, and the manager user happens to be who we're logged in as. That's the name of the user. So there is a full audit trail within ConnectOne. Everything that's done is saved and stored, so you could run a report and find out, who did what, basically. The custom reports that are set up here can also be automatically sent out through email and text. Well, email, text messaging, and push notifications are capable. So that would get set up as event rules. So if I go to my event rules now, here I have a list of possible rules I can click on. These are all entirely custom. So again, your list would start out empty, and you would create them as you need. However, if I click on one of them, I can show you how it is comprised, where basically it uses the filter reports, which are the custom reports I just showed. So in this case, it's the access denied report is what we called it. And there can be a scheduled time that the event happens for whether or not it's going to perform the actions you see below. And so this is saying anytime there's an access denial, we're going to perform the actions of sending out an instant email and also a daily report. And the daily report would go out midnight for the previous day. However, there are ways of configuring when you want the report sent. However, you could also set a time restriction. So maybe you only care to be notified of an access denial when it occurs during a particular time frame, or maybe more appropriately, not during the time frame. So in this case, maybe 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, or normal hours, and the access denial doesn't really need to be sent out through a notification. It would still always be logged, and you could run a report and see the information. But in this case, if it happened between 8:30 and 5:30, then this rule would not activate and it would not send out the notification. However, if it happens before 8:30 or after 5:30 p.m. or any time on Saturday or Sunday, then it would send out the notification. So that just is another way of further qualifying the event, so you're not getting notifications that you might not care about. There are a lot of different other actions which can be added to any event rule. And multiple people can be added to the same event rule for notifications. You don't need to create multiple rules, one rule for each person. One rule can handle sending out any number of notifications that you need. And you can see some of the other options here where we have sending out email or text, push notifications, setting up the camera to record a snapshot like I showed in the event activity list under the monitor section. You can set up on-screen alerts, which is basically a pop-up on the screen, and you can say who would get that alert as well. One example of that is if you have a security guard on site and you want the security guard to be notified of certain conditions that occurred, there's an alarm event or something like that, it can automatically pop up on the screen with an audio tone to alert them to look at the screen and see what's going on. Triggering an interaction report is a way of having a particular event automatically email a report that, and one case of that could be anytime there's a fire alarm, it could automatically trigger a report of all the day's access activity so far. So basically you could take that report and use it as a list to see who's accessed the building and make sure that they properly exited the building upon that fire alarm. You can have an event automatically activate a task rule. And again, those task rules are a way of combining multiple actions. So for instance, you could have an event that anytime an area is disarmed, you could have it activate a task rule which unlocks the door for 2 hours. And that's a possibility. You can have an event automatically trigger the lockdown to a particular location or multiple locations. So if there's a panic alarm at, somebody pressed a panic button or a designated pull station for a lockdown, this command could trigger the lockdown based on that event. If you have thermostats on your system, you can automatically have the thermostats go to what are referred to as the standard or alternate mode. And basically how that would be used typically is when your system gets disarmed, the thermostats would go into their standard operating mode. And when the system gets armed, you'd set up an event or an action through the event rule to go to the alternate schedule, which would conserve energy. And with the ticket module, you can also have an event automatically create an event ticket, which the tickets can be used for tracking the event responses. And primarily that would get used for certain events that happen, such as an alarm event, that you want tracking of that event to make sure that there's a history of what actions were taken in response to that event. And the tickets can be automatically emailed to pre-designated individuals or responsible personnel, and they can track their notes and history. And then under the tickets section here at the top, you can see all that information. So it keeps a history of the basically responses of certain events that are critical. Going further in the interaction, there is a method of creating time rules. Time rules are basically actions or statuses that you wish to check at a certain time. The most common are checking that areas of the building are armed by a certain time, and then the other is that areas are disarmed by a certain time. So we have a rule set up here currently that says that we want these particular areas, the office building inventory and the plant building main, we want to make sure that's armed by 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. If it is not armed at that time, then a event will be generated stating as such, and you can have that event go out through notifications to personnel and be sure that that area does get armed. And they could easily use the Connect One application to log in and arm those areas if need be. Also, they could look at cameras and make sure no one's currently there. There are other options too, and you can see that in this list. For instance, another common one is checking to make sure that certain doors are locked by a certain time. If not, then you can be notified of that. And then also I mentioned the ability to have the emailed reports go out at a particular time instead of at the midnight timing. And you could do that through a time rule where you can set up and specify exactly what time you would like that report sent. The task rules are, again, a way of having a single action operate multiple commands. And I activated this task rule earlier, which we named Unlock All Entry Doors. You can name it whatever you'd like. But basically, here is a set of actions that happens whenever you activate that, where on an instant timing, we have it unlocking the front door, rear door, and inventory door at these locations. And then we have it locking the door, but with a 2-hour delay in the same set of doors. So basically, as I said before, it's going to unlock the doors now, and then 2 hours later, it will lock those doors again. The ticket rules are a way of notifying when tickets are created, and it allows for an easy method of responding to those tickets and supplying notes and history to all be stored in the ticket. So as I explained earlier, like with the event responses, you can set up a primary set of people. It could be more than one, or it could be just one, and also a backup. And essentially what will happen is a primary personnel will be emailed first, and then they will have the ability to click on that email and send their response and state whether or not they're handling the situation. If no one states that they're handling it, then it will go to the backup individuals. And however, though, everyone will be emailed notifications in response to the tickets to see that who's handling it and what they're doing about it. The next section I will talk about is under profiles. And what we have here are login profiles, system profiles, and system profile templates. Login profiles have to do with logins to the Connect One application. System profiles have to do with a user's code that may be used at a keypad or an access card at a door. And system profile templates are a way of combining system profiles for multiple locations into a single template for easy entry of new users. So you start with login profiles. You'll have a list of default profiles on the system. You can modify any of them and use them however you'd like. The only one restriction is the admin login profile, which cannot be removed. It can be modified, and it gives special permissions to anyone that has the admin login profile, whereas they do not need codes on the system to operate any of the functions within Connect One, as long as they're in the admin login profile. Also, the admin login profile users are hidden to any other user that's logging into Connect One that's not in the admin login profile. So essentially within the profile, there's each of the application permissions that we see here, and there's a way of saying no permissions, view only, or view and modify. If you say no permissions to one of the functions, they will not see that as an option at all. It completely goes away. View only would allow them to see what's on the screen, but it would not give them any buttons to be able to operate anything on that screen. Or in the case of reporting, they could run reports, but they couldn't actually save any new reports or modify any of the reports that are there, for instance. And each section has its own permission that can be set. And then there are other options for designating which areas they'll see when they log in. This is the admin profile, so by default they can see all locations, and you can't actually take any of the locations away, so that's why these are disabled. But I'll pull up another profile so that you can see how you would move those back and forth. You can also set a login restriction. So if you only want them to log in during normal business hours and not be able to log in the middle of the night, you can easily configure that. You can also set up a login restriction by network. So you can put in a whitelist of IP addresses that you only want them to be able to log in from. So for instance, that would require them to log in from the company network and not from home as an option that could be configured. So I'm going to go back and then click on one of these other profiles so you can see how you can move these areas around. So the box on the right are the areas that they're able to view. The box on the left are the possible ones that you could add. So if I want to also say I want them to have the South Shop main area, so I can add that over to the right, and now that location they will be able to see. I could also say I want to move this office building area and remove that from their list. So basically by moving the areas from left and right, I can choose which areas they'll be able to see. Now, another way that the area permissions affect logins to the application is that the person logging in will only see users that have the same set of areas or less areas than the person logging in does in their profile. So in that way, you can partition the system, and only the users which either match the same permissions or, like I said, they have more permissions will be able to see those lower level users and not vice versa. The system profile, again, is the set of permissions for a user's keypad code or card or key fob that they use on the system. And I can click on one of these profiles. More can be created. They can be deleted. However you need to use your system. Each area of authority is listed by name with an option to whether or not they can arm and disarm that area, whether or not they have door access to that area. So you can easily set yes or no to these options. These little help icons give you more information about each permission, so you can see what you're setting permissions for. There can be time windows selected, which would restrict the person's access during the times that you specify. And you can have multiple windows, so you might give someone access between 8 and noon, and then again from 1 to 5. That would be handled through 2 different time windows. One time window would be 8 to noon, the other one would be 1 to 5. And you can select those from the list. The time windows themselves are set up under the schedule section, which I will go to in a minute. If you're setting up 24/7 access, then you do not need to select any time window. Just leave them all at none, and the users would have 24/7 access. Only once you apply a time window does the person's permissions get restricted by that particular schedule. And then there's other options that can be set. The most common options are arming, disarming, and door access. So you want to at least set those appropriately. The rest of the options apply to permissions mainly for managing the system. But again, these help icons give you more information about what you may be setting for the particular individual or group of individual, as these profiles will be used typically for more than one user. Now, also note that a lot of these permissions will carry over to the login permissions within Connect One as well. So when a user logs in and they have codes assigned to them, those codes will have a system profile assigned to them as well. And their permissions will be made up of the login profile, which I showed you how you can set the view only and view and modify permissions to any of the different sections of the application. And then their system profile will also be checked for whether or not they can manage anything on that particular system. Some of the typical options that would apply to that are modify system codes, modify system profiles, and modify schedules. They may have view and modify permissions in their login profile to manage users, for instance, but if their system profile says no for modifying system codes on this particular system, then they would not be able to add any codes to this system. So the user's permissions are actually combined between the login profile and the system profile. So you need to make sure that you check that their system profile has the necessary management permissions to do those functions for the system that you want them to be able to operate. So in this case, this is for the South Shop alarm panel, and this is setting system codes and profiles for this particular system, but there may be another system that we don't want them to be able to manage the codes for, so we would leave those set to no in that system profile for that person. Now, what we can do with system profile templates is combine the profiles for multiple locations into a single template. So here, for instance, we name this template General Employees, and we set up certain profiles, the office rep, sales, and office at these different locations within this template. So when we add a user's code or a card for the system, we can choose this template called General Employees, and it will automatically add that person to all those systems here with the profiles that we selected in the template. And therefore, we don't have to individually add that person to multiple systems. It can be done one time by choosing the template. And you can create as many templates as you need and configure them however you want. A template could just be one system, it could be 2, it could be 50, it could be 100 systems. It doesn't make any difference, however you need the template to be. So now, by explaining the permissions, I can then go and explain the users. So when you click on users, you have two options. You can see the user list and also see the system codes. I'm just going to show system codes first. So the system codes are what are actually in the systems, in the control panels on site, and these codes could be keypad codes for punching in at the keypad. They could be access card numbers. This gives you a way of seeing a list of all the codes, and mainly is used for searching. So if you have a particular card that gets turned in, but you don't know whose card it was, what you can do is you can type in that card number, and then it will, search for it. And if it matches a particular person, then you can see that record right here. There is also a method where you can use a USB card reader to actually scan the card, and that way then if the numbers are rubbed off on it, and so you don't actually know what the card number is, you can just scan it at the USB reader that's plugged into your PC, and in that way then it can search for it without having to actually know what the card number is. If I needed to modify this person, I can click on their user, and then I can see the information about the person. And you can upload an image by using the upload option here, or you can choose a file to upload and store their image for, which does a few things. It not only shows you the image here, it would the image would show up on the activity screen, so you can see if when they use their card, their image will pop up next to it. And it also gives options for badge printing and exporting if you want to use an actual badge. Shows their login profile, their last login, the last activity they had, email addresses and contact information can be added. Their codes or cards that they have will be in the system here, and it also shows recent activity by this person. We can deactivate the user and we can delete the user as options. Deactivating will essentially make the user no longer function. If they have a login, they won't be able to log in. If they have a code or a card or on the system, that will temporarily not work while they're deactivated, but all their information will remain within the application with a status inactive. And that way then, if you'd like to reactivate the person at a later date, you can just choose activate and all their information is there already. If you choose delete, essentially the same thing will happen, where their login won't work, their codes or cards won't work. However, their information has been removed, so you would have to re-enter their card numbers, their permissions, all of that, if you choose to activate them again in the future. Go back and actually go to the user list. And the user list is a way you can search by somebody's name and pull up their user, and it will show all the information like I showed. But it's also the method if you're going to add somebody new. And no matter what you're adding for a person, you always start by going to the user list and hitting create a new user. From here, you would type in the person's name, whatever that happens to be. These are custom fields. They've been named this way. They start out with just a generic custom naming, but you can change this to anything you want. And any of these 5 fields can be changed however you'd like. There are options to setting these to be searchable or hidden. And searchable means that they'll be in the user list that you can search by. So if you want to search by their ID number, you can set that to be as such, or it can just be hidden from the main list view. And then there's also options of restricting it that it has to be a unique set of information, which is probably what you would want for an ID number, since you don't want to accidentally enter a duplicate ID number for somebody. Setting it to be unique would ensure that it's a unique number. Then you would select their login profile. By default, there's a no authority login profile that you can use. And a no authority login profile, if it hasn't been changed, it just like it applies, it doesn't give them authority for anything. But you could choose any profile you'd like. And one option, if you'd like them to be able to log in with some set of permissions, you can choose a login name and password for them. You can have as many users as you need logged in simultaneously. They can all have a different set of permissions, so there's no limit to that. So if you do have multiple users that need to log in and access the system, you want to make sure you give them their own login name and password, so nobody's sharing any logins. And that way you can deactivate a login if necessary real easily without deactivating multiple people. So I'm going to set one up here so you can see. And you have an option of specifying a password, or you can email login instructions to the person, which will randomly generate a password, and it will give them all the instructions for how to access the application, download the mobile apps, and gives them their login information, so you don't have to send a separate email to do that. You would just enter their email address here. Well, it looks like we already have a Joe Smith, so let's just change it a little bit. And there we go. Now we have a new user. The next step would be adding them to a particular system or multiple systems with their keypad code or card that you want them to use for accessing the system. So to do that, you would click Add. And now we can choose either one of the templates that we created, or we could choose an individual system and just add it to that if that's what we'd like. In this case, I'm going to show you adding a template. So I showed the general employees template before, and so I'm going to choose that. And I'd specify the code or card that is going to be used, and I'm going to specify a card. I can choose an activation date and also an expiration date. So if I don't want this code to be active, say I'm setting it up ahead of time for somebody's access, I could put in an activation date, so this code actually won't be active in the system until the date that I specify. And then also an expiration date, whereas the code will only be active for so long and it will automatically expire. Now I hit save, and that card has been added to 3 of my systems: the plant building, the South Shop, the office building, and that was all done through the template that I predefined under the system profile templates. So it was very easy to add this person to multiple locations by using those templates. If I need to edit and say they lost their card and we have to give them a new one, I just change that number to whatever it's supposed to be, and now their new card is now active. If I want to deactivate this person, I can just simply go to deactivate, and this is asking me, there are codes, do you want to inactivate them as well? Yes, I do. And now this person is inactive. And that applies to not only their login, but that also applies to their card, so neither will work. One other point that I'd like to bring up is if you do delete somebody, as I said, their information goes away, so you couldn't reactivate them easily. However, their event history does not go away. You will always be able to run history on users that have been deleted. So you'll have that information. To explain schedules, there's different schedule types. I'm going to start with the time windows. And the time windows are multi-purpose. They can be applied to system profiles, which I showed earlier for when someone's access may work at the building. However, they can also apply to doors. If you want a door to be unlocked during certain times of the day, the time window can also apply to a door. And you can have multiple time windows in the system. There is also an option to have a time window be temporary. So if you have a particular out of the ordinary sequence that you want to handle, you can set that up ahead of time by setting a temporary start date and a temporary end date. And basically this time window will be active during that time frame, and it will automatically deactivate once the temporary time expires. However, most of the time your time windows will not be temporary and they'll remain in effect forever until you make any changes. So this is stating that between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. on Monday, and 2 to 6 Wednesday, Thursday 2 to 6 p.m., and Friday 2 to 6, this time window would be active. And if we're applying it to a system profile, then that would be the times that those particular individuals would be able to be granted access into the building. For instance, if they came Saturday, Tuesday, or Sunday, they would be denied access if this was their time window of permissions. There's also the ability to schedule holidays, and you have 3 definitions for any holiday date, and that's a Group A, Group B, or Group C. You can edit those dates by clicking on where it says Edit Dates, and the edit dates is the same no matter where you click on it. So any time window you can go to and hit Edit Dates, and you'll see the same list of holidays. So any particular system can have just one list of holidays, so it doesn't matter how you access it. So here we have a list of holidays. You assign the date to a Group A, a Group B, or a Group C. Their options are here. And so typically how that is used is Group A holidays would be when you don't want anyone to access at all. You could set up Group B holidays to be half days, for instance, where you only want them to be able to access in the morning, for instance, and Group C could be used for another purpose, however you see fit. There is an option at the bottom that's pre-checked to apply it to all systems. So that way you only have to maintain one list of holidays, even if you do have multiple systems. Once your holidays are set, then you can set the times for those particular groups. So as I said, Group A could be when you don't want them to access at all, and that's where the dashes would apply. Dashes mean that they don't have access. Group B can then be, for instance, like a half day. So I guess 2 a.m. is our start time, and let's say 10 a.m. is when we want it to stop. So basically, if there's a Group B holiday today, instead of the normal time, they'll be allowed 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. As an exception. As I said, these time windows can also apply to doors. So if you have a Group A holiday for a door schedule and it's set to dashes, that means that door will not unlock that particular day. If it's a Group B holiday date, and this is for a door to unlock, it will use the time specified here, where in this case the door would unlock at 2 a.m. and lock at 10 a.m. As an exception to the normal timing. The tickets give the ability to view the history on any of the tickets that have been created. I explained the case of an event ticket where you're storing responses to particular events that occurred to track, who did what to respond to that. Say it was an alarm event or whatever it happened to be. Could be a temperature event, whereas there was a high temperature like we had in our server room, where you could have a ticket that recorded the responses of who did what to respond to that particular event. They can also be used for other purposes as well, though. For instance, tracking repairs at the building, and it just gives you access to see those notes. You're able to change the statuses, for instance. You can add new notes. You can add attachments, which can be pictures of anything. Like, for instance, if there's a repair needed on a particular door, there can be pictures stored to it to be shared with the vendors that might be fixing that door, for instance. Or you just want to keep it for history. Utilities allow you to see the different systems that you may have at your facilities, and for the intrusion systems and access systems, you can click on them to see status of their power status, battery status, for so on. And another method of seeing the codes, there is also an option for importing codes from a CSV list. So if you have a lot of codes that you're adding at once, you can set up an Excel sheet, and clicking on this gives you the necessary information of how to define that sheet, and it allows you to import it from a list rather than creating them one by one. So that is an option. Some other key buttons, the account allows you to go quickly to your user. If you wanted to change your password, for instance, you could do that. And another option, which may or may not apply, but if you do have multiple accounts, ConnectOne accounts, you can link those accounts for easy access. So if you have another account, you can type in that login name, password, and customer number and link it so that you can switch between those accounts very easily without having to re-log in to both systems. And once you link accounts, they'll be listed here on the screen, so you could go back and forth by using the accounts window. That is the overview of ConnectOne. I appreciate your time and watching the video. Thank you.